Hi there, hope you're having a pleasant day wherever you may be. I'm back at a place that is difficult to remember, but definitely shouldn't be forgotten. I'm at Tule Lake Segregation Center.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
Tule Lake Segregation Center is located in Northern California near the town of Newell, and it's about an hour-and-a-half drive from Interstate 5. So what exactly is the Tule Lake Segregation Center? Well, it was one of the war relocation centers, better known as concentration camps, that the U.S. implemented during World War II. After the bombing of Pearl Harbor in December of 1941, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066, forcing all Japanese and Japanese Americans into war relocation centers. Now, unfortunately, there's not a lot left of Tule Lake. If you'd like to get a better picture of what life in the concentration camp was like, feel free to check out my video of Manzanar, or better yet, visit Manzanar. My video could only do so much to describe what was going on there. You really need to go there and experience it for yourself. With that said, let's go ahead and get back to this one. So for starters, you might be wondering, why is this one called a segregation center instead of a war relocation center like the others? Well, after the implementation of Executive Order 9066, 10 war relocation centers were established, including Tule Lake. Now, shortly after, they implemented a loyalty questionnaire that were given out to all of the prisoners at the various concentration camps, and it was found that Tule Lake had the highest percentage, 42%, that were deemed quote-unquote disloyal. Now, this disloyalty stemmed from a couple of factors. Some were just language, because some of these people, Japanese is their primary language. Two was very ambiguous wording of how the questions were phrased. And three, they had just rounded up 120,000 people for no reason whatsoever. So sure, some of these people didn't want to be loyal to the U.S., and justifiably so. So, in the infinite wisdom of the people running the war relocation centers, they decided to transfer out all of the loyal prisoners and round up all the disloyal prisoners from all the other camps and bring them here. Of the 120,000 people that were held captive in these concentration camps, Tule Lake started off with about 15,000 or so, and then once it was deemed a segregation center and held all the disloyals, that ballooned up to 18,000. And that many people, that close together, the conditions were poor, and people were just angry, and you had this mixture of people that were loyal and disloyal, and there was a lot of conflict here, so much so that the U.S. Army had to step in for a period of several months and declare martial law here. Now, there is a section dedicated to Tule Lake and the questionnaire at Manzanar, and if I remember correctly, there were family members where one member of the family would be deemed disloyal and they were going to be shipped to Tule Lake. So the other family members would do what they can to be deemed disloyal as well, so they wouldn't break up the family and all get sent here together. It's terrible that had to be the situation that these poor people were put in. Ultimately, in 1945, 9 of the 10 war relocation centers were closed down, the 10th one being Tule Lake. But because they had sent so many people here that were quote-unquote disloyal, that they had people that were going to be deported, and then legal issues came into being. If I'm not mistaken, they deported about 400 as opposed to the thousands that they were originally going to. It ended up closing in 1946, which is kind of weird since the war had already been over for a pretty long time at that point. As far as visiting Tule Lake, like I said, there's really not much left, and it's kind of confusing because it's sort of broken up into 3 different points. The first one being here, this is the site of the actual camp, which, despite being called Tule Lake and there being a town of Tule Lake right next door, it's actually in the town of Newell. So like I said, there's really nothing left of the original camp. There was the jail here, and that was recently restored. So this is more or less one of the only buildings here at the original camp that remains. And if you'd like to go inside, you have to do a ranger guided tour. I believe they do those on the weekends in non-COVID eras. In the town of Tule Lake, there is actually a museum. However, the museum is a part of the fairgrounds. So the museum costs $5, and apparently it's more of like a regional museum about the fair and agriculture, and happens to include some about Tule Lake. Now, when you walk in, before you even go into the museum, there's a little desk with some information, a couple pamphlets, a couple things to read, some pictures you can look at. So that was pretty cool. And then outside you have this guard tower and a building. Neither one of them, I'm not sure if they're original or recreations. I would lean on recreations, but yeah, that's here in town. This here is Camp Tule Lake, which was actually not a part of the concentration camp. It was a section of buildings that were built previously in the 1930s for the Civilian Conservation Corps. But then when Executive Order 9066 was put into place, they began shipping the disloyal Japanese Americans that were unwilling to fill out the loyalty questionnaire that they were given at the camps. This is where they were sent. This was sort of the punishment for them. Toward the end of the war, the Japanese Americans were transferred from here and ended up using this as a POW camp for the Italian and German prisoners of war. The buildings that are here, they ask that you view them from a distance from here. You can do tours of them, probably in a non-COVID era, I'm sure, on Saturdays during the summer. Now, it's a shame that there's not more left and there's not a better representation of it, like Manzanar. I hate to keep pointing back to Manzanar, but they did a really good job of turning that gym into a museum, and the NPS did a great job of just encapsulating the experience and really driving home what went on here. Whereas here at Tule Lake, there's really not much to look at. There's really not much to experience. And it could be because it's very remote. This is in a pretty barren stretch of Northern California where not a lot of population centers, where Manzanar is much more accessible, especially to like the LA population. Keeping that in mind, because there's not very much for me to actually show you on this video, I'll kind of resort back to the Manzanar video, and this will be sort of a companion video to that one. Well, that does it for this one. Thanks for joining me on this trip to Tule Lake Segregation Center. I hope you found it informative. Maybe it encourages you to come check this out if you happen to be in the area. Like I said, there's not a lot here, so it's a little bit of a tough sell to make it for a dedicated trip. But there are other things in the region. If you happen to check those out, swing by and take a look at what's left. I mean, like I said, not much, but appreciate the little that there is. So with that said, I guess I'll see you on the next one. It was said that these prisoners were brought by rail, and there are train tracks right across the street from the Segregation Center. Kind of makes you wonder, were the people brought on those trains?